Tensions are mounting between anti-corruption bodies in Ukraine. This week, the Qualification Disciplinary Commission of Prosecutors failed to fire Nazar Kholodnytskyi, the head of the Specialized Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's office, despite other anti-corruption activists calling for the action. This comes as the Specialized Anti-Corruption Prosecutor closes a high-profile case against the Interior Minister's son, who has been accused of embezzlement, and People's Front MP Denis Dzhenzersky, who failed to declare his debts of more than 150 million US dollars. We have Anti-Corruption Action Center's Anastasia Krasnosilska in the studio to tell us what this means for anti-corruption efforts in Ukraine. Thank you for being with us, Ms. Krasnosilska. And before we go into discussion, I suggest that we see a report that Hromadske has prepared. Hromadske has been following the Kholodnytskyi case. Let's take a look at the report prepared by our colleagues who were present at the Qualification Disciplinary Commission of Prosecutors hearing on the 26th of July.
On July 26, the Qualification Disciplinary Commission of Prosecutors met to decide whether to dismiss Specialized Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office head Nazar Kholodnytskyi, who has been accused of interfering with anti-corruption efforts. Journalists, representatives of the Anti-Corruption Action Center, and other civic activists came to the hearing.
We only want the law to be respected. We demand to be let into the hearing because we have the right to be there, as does the media and the public.
A decision to close the hearing to the public should be justified before the cameras. The problem is that they made this decision behind closed doors, and it's a direct violation of the law.
After the break, journalists were allowed into the meeting room where the decision of the disciplinary commission was announced. Despite accusations of interfering with criminal investigations, the commission did not dismiss Kholodnytskyi. The public heckled the decision.
So, Ms. Krasnosilska, the Qualification Commission says that Ukraine's legislation does not allow to fire Nazar Kholodnytskyi as head of the Specialized Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office. But we understand that he still may be fired from his position as a prosecutor, which will make him unfit for holding the office. Why the Qualification Commission didn't go this way?
Well, the Qualification Commission allowed itself a unique manipulation with the law. According to the law, they perfectly have the powers to dismiss Kholodnytskyi as a prosecutors. They actually found that his actions were a grave violation. And the result of that should have been a decision on Kholodnytskyi being unfit for a position of the prosecutor. Yep. And this basically should have led to his dismissal from position of the prosecutor and, of course, from position of from the head of Special Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office. This was a lawful way for the Commission. But the Commission took a very partial decision. They actually agreed that what Kholodnytskyi committed was a grave offense, but they only sanctioned him with a reprimand, which is nothing, and which we regard as a direct violation of the law on prosecution.
Well, this is the position of anti-corruption activists, but what the anti-corruption bodies are planning to do now?
Well, actually, this is also the position of National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine. They also stated in their official statement that, yes, Qualification Commission had all the powers to deem Kholodnytskyi unfit, and as a result of this decision to fire him as a prosecutor. Unfortunately, the Commission failed to perform its duty, and for us, this is first of all a sign that prosecutorial reform in Ukraine not just failed, but is non-existent. one of the aims of prosecutorial reform was basically to provide for opportunities for prosecution to purify literally itself from tainted prosecutors. Unfortunately, in the case of Kholodnytskyi, we now see that this is not working.
One of the most high-profile cases that Mr. Kholodnytskyi has closed is the case against the son of the Interior Minister, Mr. Avakov. What is the official explanation for the closure of the case, and what are theories by other people?
Well, actually, this case was closed in a very cynical way. Just 3 months ago, in March this year, anti-corruption prosecutors agreed that there were enough evidences collected in the case and that the case should be filed to the court. However, after this decision has been taken, prosecutors, without even informing NABU detectives, hold some additional investigative activities, questioned some additional witness, and based on this, somehow made a decision that there were not enough evidences. For us, it's a very strange logic when prosecutors first say that evidences that were collected were enough, but then all of a sudden change their opinion. For us, it is also very symptomous that the case against the son of the Minister of Interior, a very influential person in this country, is being closed, and just a week after that, close ally of the Minister of Interior, Mr. Avakov, actually comes to prosecutor's office to somehow protect Kholodnytskyi against mass protest.
When you say we and us, do you mean just the Anti-Corruption Center or other public organizations?
We mean civil society, which has been very active in basically pushing for establishment of Special Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office and Anti-Corruption Bureau, and we have had very high hopes of the activities of Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office, which unfortunately now are not fulfilling themselves.
I want to show you some document because the prosecutors in Ukraine have been divided over this case, and here on the screen we can see a petition where prosecutors have signed in support of Kholodnytskyi. However, there were a number of prosecutors who refused to sign the document. And my next question to Anastasia Kholodnytskyi from the Anti-Corruption Action Center is, what do you make of this?
We actually think that prosecutors who signed this letter protect themselves because, yes, they were the ones who took decisions to close cases or manipulate the cases. Allegedly, they did so upon request or pressure from their director, Mr. Kholodnytskyi. So when they are trying to protect Kholodnytskyi, they are actually protecting themselves. Because if Kholodnytskyi took unlawful decisions, they unfortunately were part of this scheme and also have to be worried about their future.
I remind the listeners and viewers that the letter says that certain individuals are trying to compile a list of personal complaints against SAPO's work, which accumulated throughout SAPO's performance, regardless of whether these complaints are part of the Commission's subject area, as well as use it as a way of influencing the Commission's decision to fire the head prosecutor. The team of the Specialized Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office cannot see this as anything else other than pressure, not as much as on the SAPO head himself, but on each and every one of us. This is exactly what Ms. Krasnosilska said, that they are trying to protect themselves. But how real is the danger? As they protect themselves and each other, do you feel that the civil society and some other anti-corruption bodies have enough power to push the case forward?
Well, basically, first off, now the decision to bring Kholodnytskyi to justice lies on the Prosecutor General of Ukraine. NABU director informed that there are allegedly two criminal cases against Mr. Kholodnytskyi. These cases are being investigated by the Prosecutor General Office, and the Prosecutor General Yuriy Lutsenko is the one who is responsible for serving notification of suspicion to Kholodnytskyi in these two cases. So this is what we await from him. Second, this huge problem with Special Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office basically endangers all the anti-corruption infrastructure in Ukraine, because even after anti-corruption court is being created, without independent prosecutor's office, we will literally have no strong cases to be heard by this court, and our hope of bringing corrupt officials to justice will once again not be fulfilled.
Early this year, it was revealed that the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine has bugged Mr. Kholodnytskyi office. From your point of view, how legal, how lawful was this, and what impact it had on the further proceedings?
Well, of course it was legal, because no one in this country can bug someone without judicial warrant.
Well,
the case within, at least National Anti-Corruption Bureau cannot, at least National Anti-Corruption Bureau cannot, and technologically this is being done not even by Anti-Corruption Bureau, but by State Security Service. Once again, the whole story was as follows. The criminal case has been opened by Prosecutor General Office. They were the ones who received judicial warrants for wiretaping and a number of other investigative activities, and they only asked Anti-Corruption Bureau for technical assistance, which result as what we now know as wiretaping in Mr. Kholodnytsky's office.
How independent in their actions is the National Anti-Corruption Bureau and its head, Mr. Sytnyk?
We have seen no indications of Anti-Corruption Bureau being dependent. We know of no cases that have been closed or that have been poorly investigated intentionally by NABU detectives, but unfortunately we have some bad indications about activities of Mr. Kholodnytskyi, and we're having these indications for at least a year by now, so they appeared actually much earlier than tapes from his office have been revealed.
Hromadske approached Mr. Kholodnytskyi for comment twice. However, he declined to speak on the matter because he was tired. Anyway, let's take a look at what Kholodnytsky's deputy, Maxim Hryshuk, had to say on the matter.
The head of NABU, Artem Sytnyk, stated that there is no cooperation between NABU and SAPO because the top criminal cases are being closed.
NABU and SAPO work together. We both sign procedural documents. How can you say there is no cooperation?
Because you recently closed the cases of Avakov and Zhendzhersky.
I cannot comment on the cases that I'm not supervising, so neither Avakov's nor Dzerzhinsky's case. I can only discuss what I know.
But as deputy head, you should know everything about these cases.
No, we have the head of the office for this. I can only comment on cases that I supervise.
You're deflecting from the issue.
I disagree. You're asking questions and I'm giving you answers.
As a SAPO representative, do you think Kholodnytskyi has a moral right to keep his position?
I am for a legal resolution of this case, and there is a legal decision.
So this was Maxim Hryshuk, his deputy to the head of the Specialized Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office, Mr. Nazar Kholodnytskyi. He was given the answers to journalist questions after Hromadske has unsuccessfully tried to put questions to Mr. Kholodnytskyi himself. Anastasia Krasnosilska from the Anti-Corruption Action Center is with us. You know what I spotted? Both Mr. Kholodnytskyi and Mr. Hryshuk seem to be rather passionless about the case. Yes, they keep stiff upper lip, they do not show emotion, while the head of the center that you work for, Mr. Shabunin, showed in the first report, he was all over the place with his hands and all this kind of stuff. Does it mean that you are being over emotional with the case, and how this impact on the perception of the case by the public?
Well, we only comment on the case based on Ukrainian legislation. We read the law on the prosecution in Ukraine, and there we see full capacity of Qualification Commission of Prosecutors to fire Mr. Kholodnytskyi as a prosecutor if they see he have committed a grave offense. They actually saw a grave offense in what he did and what was presented in tapes from his office. So we are very much, of course, upset that Qualification Commission of Prosecutors, which was presented to the society as part of the prosecutorial reform, actually failed to implement the hope of the reform and simply to apply the law in a due way. Of course, we are a bit emotional about this, but this does not change what is written in the law on prosecution.
Can we say that there is a coalition of public activists or public organizations, non-government organizations working for the success of the anti-corruption case in the case of the Specialized Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office? And if so, are there any attempts on the side of SAPO to organize public activists in their support?
We cannot claim that these efforts were by SAPO to organize people in their support, but we have clearly seen how Mr. Kiva, who used to be an advisor to Mr. Avakov, Minister of the Interior, Mr. Kiva actually brought some people in front of prosecutor's office to show kinds of public support for what SAPO is doing. And for us, this is a very clear indication of political nature of SAPO's activities, which is, of course, something unacceptable for newly established anti-corruption body.
You said that public activists do not have any proof or any evidence of Mr. Sytnyk or the National Anti-Corruption Bureau, which he heads, being dependent on whoever. But we have a video of Mr. Sytnyk going to the president's office in the middle of the night. Let's have a look.
Трасою чекаємо, коли виїдуть візитери Петра Порошенка. З вулиці виїжджає Мерседес С-класу, за ним Шкода і Мерседес Віто.
So, what do you make of this? Why such a secrecy? Why in the middle of the night, if they don't have anything to hide?
Well, first of all, meetings in the middle of the night, sometimes in his private residence, this is the style of the president of Ukraine. This is his normal way of arranging business meetings. So Mr. Sytnyk, unfortunately, had nothing to do about this and was not in a position to influence this. Secondly, these meetings had actually been held in April this year, but information has been released just probably a few weeks ago, probably a week or two ago. From April till the end of July, we haven't seen any indications of NABU taking political decisions. No cases closed by detectives. NABU did not change their position on anti-corruption court. It remained strong and it remained very uncomfortable for the presidential administration. So after that visit, we still have no indications and nothing to blame Anti-Corruption Bureau with.
One of the questions that arises from your answer is about the accessibility of information and accessibility for the public of the information that you hold and you disseminate. Quite frankly, how often are you on air on leading Ukrainian TV channels or radio stations? Do you have any problems with this?
We have problems with accessing some media channels close to some, I would say, influential politicians. For example, personally, I haven't been on air on the 5th channel, allegedly connected, so to say, to the president of Ukraine for more than a year by now, which for us is also a bit symptomous. Our messaging, of course, is very uncomfortable for many politicians in Ukraine, while others say that these are authorities or politicians to blame. Our strong position is that corruption as well as responsibility should always have a surname. And when we have allegations against the president of Ukraine or any other officials, we actually name the surnames, which is of course a bit uncomfortable for some Ukrainian media.
Ms. Krasnosilska, forgive me for venturing into the field of forecasts, presumptions, and suppositions, but we have elections coming closer and closer to us. From your point of view, and you of course know almost all about anti-corruption fight, how prominent this issue will be on the agenda of people who will be competing for highest positions in Ukraine?
Well, I would say that people who will be competing have no choice to ignore anti-corruption fights in their pre-electoral messaging. However, we think that this issue will be highly exploited, and unfortunately, I have to say that taking under control Special Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's office is actually a strategy for defense for top officials now as they are being pushed to establish anti-corruption court, independent anti-corruption court with international participation. However, from our side, we of course will not let the society forget that now, once again, the Prosecutor General Yuriy Lutsenko, who we think still has some political ambitions, he is responsible for fixing the problem with Special Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's office and bringing Kholodnytskyi to liability.
Well, we'll see. Thank you very much, Anastasia Krasnosilska. Ms. Krasnosilska from the Anti-Corruption Center Anti-Corruption Action Center was in the studio of Hromadske International, and we will be back in a second.